Hello and welcome. I am the Restless Kaiser.
I'm Johnny B. And
I'm Nick from Medieval Warrior.
True fact. But together we are
Modern
for Advantage.
Well, hello there, folks, and good evening. Let's see who we've got in the chat tonight. We've got Ricky Turner. Hi, Ricky. We've got Rich John. Hello. We've got John Clark. Nice to see that. Is a fine hat you've got in that little thumbnail there, sir. Rose is here, of course, reminding everyone to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I appreciate if you like the video before you've even watched it. That's great. Thank you. Tony Holton here. I just noticed this before we went live. Sitting in an armchair with a smoking jacket, cravat, and fez with a snifter of rum. Excellent, sir. Excellent. That is how life should be. I don't think that's... Yeah, we're a couple of minutes late because Nick and I share a dirty habit, don't we, Nick?
Yeah, we do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was smoking. Right. So, hobby-wise tonight, I am working on the new 250 Alta hard track from Bolt Action, which I'm going to use in our first combined arms battle, which I'm having with John next week or the week after. Any hobby for you, Nick?
I'm painting some 15mm. I'm painting some 15mm that I have here. Nothing much, but just to complete my 15mm armies here. It's here living abroad. It's easier to move the 15mm. So and play with a smaller table. I don't have the space I have home. So yes, I'm painting some 15 so I can complete the armies and play a couple of games. That's it.
Beautiful. You did mention that, I think, last time you was on stream. That's very good. I'm painting some random archer dudes, which are sort of like maybe what you're talking about tonight, but not quite.
Are they
War of the Roses, if I'm honest. Huh?
Are they Perry War of the Roses ones?
Yeah, it's close, similar, same but different. Anyways, before we go into this awesome slideshow that you're about to see, Nick, could you enter the bit? Well, you don't need to. You're in the middle. You're big enough. Can you tell the viewers who you are and where they can find you? Because you have a whole YouTube channel.
Yes, I am Nick. I am a YouTube channel called Medieval Warrior Wargaming. Mostly I'm focusing in medieval times and especially 100 Years War. And yeah, that's it. If I have showcases. I do this pocket biographies and historical battles where other YouTubers are narrating for me, and I'm using miniatures and some great game graphics. So yeah, I'm trying to give in my limited subject of the 100 Years War. I'm trying to give as much variety as I can.
Nice, and that is good having that visual representation with the miniatures.
Yeah,
very nice.
Have you watched any of those pocket biographies he does, John?
I believe I've watched a few.
Yeah, I really like those because I spent so much time studying the Wars of the Roses at university. That was my special subject, and it was understanding the personalities involved what really brought it to life. That's what made it alive. So rather than this is, okay, so Oxford did this and Somerset did that. It's like, but once you've got an idea of who these people are, it really starts to kind of fit together a little bit more and helps me understand and grasp and get immersed in it. So I really appreciate those, especially because they're the same names in the 100 Years War, but it's their dad or their granddad from the one that
yeah, that's really weird. That confuses the hell out of me.
I mean, it's interesting how many of them have still got the same role. So, like you mentioned about before about John, there's more than one John de Vere in history. And they're both Earl of Oxford, but one of them is at the Battle of Bosworth, and one of them is a 100 Years War commander. And I think you did John de Vere's biography recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I have done.
You're John de Vere.
He's one of my favorite. Seven Death. The one in the 100 Years War is the Seven Earls of Oxford, but also the Salisbury family. You have the Earl of Salisbury who fought in the Battle of Poitiers. His nephew, who was the famous Salisbury, who fought was in the Siege of Orleans, and he was in the Battle of Verneuil, one very famous commander. And then, of course, you have Salisbury in the Wars of the Roses, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Nick. So the 100 Years' War. You got some slides you're going to go through, but let's just not assume that everybody knows what we're talking about here. So the 100 Years' War is a dynastic clash between the Plantagenet House of England and the Dauphin of France. What's that family?
Well, you had the Armagnacs. You have basically it was the Armagnacs who were the family of the Armagnacs who were French, and they were fighting with the Burgundians in a civil war.
But what complicates it is that family is split and into two halves as well. There's a Burgundian faction, which we call them Burgundians, but they're just another French. They're a duchy, but they're as big as the English bit of France or the French bit of France, aren't they? So it's a three-player game, the 100 Years' War.
The Burgundians up to a point were supporting. Well, in the later parts of the 100 Years' War were English allies, so they were in an important role because of the hatred they had for the Dauphin and his. Their leader was killed by the Armagnacs. So there was a civil war. That's something that the English took advantage and managed to conquer. Almost half of France. The civil war was always when you have a civil war, you cannot recruit the best armies. You cannot recruit as many as you want. You have spies in your midst. So it was very important. And that's why also the English lost the 100 Years' War, because at that point, I can imagine the Wars of the Roses were brewing. Things were becoming difficult back home. So you couldn't sustain your armies.
The Wars of the Roses are a direct consequence of losing the 100 Years' War. That's Richard Duke of York's great contention. He's paying to fight the French, and the king's doing nothing, and we're losing, and it's a disaster. You've got these three rival claimants to the crown of France, and so we think of the 100 Years' War as Englishmen, and Agincourt being like a definitive moment in history. We very much think of it as an English thing, but what you really need to understand the 100 Years' War is it's really a French civil war, because the King of England was also a Duke of France. This is one of the things that happens because William the Conqueror was the Duke of Normandy. And every time a new King of France would come along, the King of England would go and pay notional homage to the King of France and just keep everything quiet, saying, yes, I'm one of your dukes, fine, move on. Edward, I think it was Edward III, was like, screw you, prick. I'm not giving you any notional homage or anything like that. And it all kind of kicks off. But it's not just the insult. It's like Edward feels he's got a claim. And indeed, even today, the fleur-de-lis is on the English standard. Do you happen to know, Nick, when England gave up its claim on the throne of France?
No, I don't. I have no idea when this happened.
I mean, it's still on the royal standard, but we officially gave up the claim in 1803.
Really?
Because they were supporting French, trying to put a French king back on the King of France. Like, why would we do that? If we're supposed to be King of France, maybe we should change that. As late as 1803 is when they finally gave up their official claim. So anyway, that's that.
Well, the issue with the 100 Years' War also was that, as you said, at a point, Edward III, with his marriage to I don't recall now, the English king had more land in France than the French king.
Yeah,
and the French didn't like this, and that's why this thing. You had Guinea, and you had Normandy. You had if you see the 100 Years' War map, you will see that the English kings had more estates in France than the actual French king. Also, there was another issue. There was the wool trade with Flanders that was giving the English a lot of money, and the Flemish were earning a lot of money from the English as well. So the French didn't like this; they wanted to control it. So there was a lot of things that really were a reason to start the 100 Years' War, except, of course, the honor of the English king, obviously.
So the 100 Years' War, it kicks off. There's some fighting. We have Agincourt, disaster for the French. I can't remember where your presentation starts, is what I'm now realizing. which point I need to hand over to you. The battle we're talking about today is Verneuil. Verneuil?
I don't know how you pronounce it. A friend of mine told me you pronounce it in French, Verneuil, but I'm not sure. I don't speak French, but I think it's Verneuil.
Verneuil. This is almost 10 years after Agincourt. It's 1424.
Exactly 10 years after.
Is the campaign we're going to look at. But the kind of the culture shock, the legacy of Cressy carries on. So I think if it's all right, Nick, I'm going to hand over to you now, and we'll put the presentation up. No, let's find the right one. Is it? There it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So
the Battle of Verneuil was fought on 17th of August, as you say here, 1424. We're going to go a few years earlier. We're going to go brief historical, let's say, discussion from Agincourt onwards. Why? To understand why this battle was called the Second Agincourt and why this battle was the bloodiest battle of the 100 Years' War. It was actually a bloodbath, and it was basically a grudge match. And we need to go a few years earlier to understand why this was a grudge match, why there was such a bloody affair. So if we go to the next slide and talk about Agincourt. Now, after Agincourt, I mean, the French were in disarray. They were afraid to fight the English in open field. They didn't know how to manage the longbowmen. I mean, Charles VI of France was mad. The future Charles VII, the Dauphin, was only 16, and Normandy were lost. The Duke of Burgundy, as we said before, was controlling Paris, and the situation was desperate. That's after Agincourt, the French were afraid to fight the English in an open field. At that time, they requested from the Scots, King James of Scotland, if I'm not mistaken, but he was imprisoned by the English, or I think it was Robert Stewart, volunteers to come and support. So the Scottish sent the biggest army they could. They sent 6,000 to 7,000 men-at-arms to France under Archibald Douglas and John Stuart, the Earl of Buchan. The Scottish army were basically the largest army that the French had in the Loire Valley. This is the area where the, let's say, still battle was going on, and there were strongholds that the English wanted to capture. Now, knowing that the French were afraid, we understand why they brought the Scottish to help them, the old alliance, as we're saying. Now, if we go to the next slide, and now we'll see the Earl of Clarence. Now, the Earl of Clarence was Henry V's younger brother. He was made lieutenant of after Agincourt, and before Henry V left, he left Clarence as a lieutenant of France to control the area and to provide a series of raids through Anjou and Maine. Now, in order to continue, we have to understand that Clarence was one of the very beloved brothers of Henry V, and he was very loved in England. But unfortunately, whoever knows about Agincourt, in the Battle of Agincourt, you know that it was after the siege of Harfleur, where half of the English army returned back to England with dysentery. So Henry V marched with the rest of the army, around 6,000 men. Clarence was one of those commanders who had dysentery, and he returned back to England. Why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because he felt very bad. We will understand his rashness and his eagerness to fight. He felt he missed a big battle. You know what I mean?
Of a generation.
Exactly. He missed the battle
because he was on the toilet.
Exactly.
He's not happy about that.
Yeah, he missed the battle of the century.
This was the battle to be at, and I wasn't there.
Exactly. And he was a great warrior and a great commander. He was the youngest brother of Henry V. So you can understand when Henry V left, and he left him as lieutenant of France with some great commanders supporting him. We're going to talk about it. He felt really, he wanted to prove himself, and he became quite rash, you know what I mean? So in March, Clarence was supported by some great commanders of the era. If you go to the next slide, Kaiser, I'll show you. He had the Earl of Salisbury, one of the greatest commanders. This was his lieutenants. Amfeville, another great commander. Both were Agincourt veterans. They had Somerset, Huntington, and Ross. These are five commanders who were supporting him and were guiding him. So in 1421, Clarence was doing a raid through Anjou and Maine. By Good Friday, they camped near the Ville Bourget. It's a city where the battle takes its name from. And when they arrived, they understood that they were not aware that the Franco-Scottish armies were there, and the scouts mentioned this to Clarence. And Clarence was keen to engage the Scottish forces and disperse them. It was also Easter Sunday, and it was unthinkable at that time to start a battle. And most of the English army in the vicinity, in the area, were foraging, were in foraging missions, and there were not all the army was there. So when Clarence stumbled upon the Scots, he pressed his advantage. He wanted to fight them regardless of the situation. He had only 1,000. If you go to the next slide, he had only 1,000 men-at-arms, mounted knights. The Earls of Salisbury told him to wait so he can bring the longbowmen, and but he was not willing to wait. As I said, we understand his rashness, because if you go to the next slide, Kaiser, I will show you the area of the this is John Stewart, 3rd Earl of Buchan, and Archibald Douglas, I was talking before, were the commanders who brought 6,000 volunteers in 1421 in France, because the French were not.
Scots army.
Yeah, the Scottish army, with the Earl of Buchan, who was Constable of France.
Yeah. So
now,
take a moment here, Nick. Just worth pointing out how feudal armies work a little bit, and why these particular cadres of troops might be so significant, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So
sure.
under kind of feudal law, everybody, the pyramid that comes down to the king, most people are familiar with this, that the dukes owe loyalty to the king, that the earls owe loyalty to some dukes or directly to the king. And then there's lords below that, and there's knights below them, and there's yeoman farmers below them, and then there's ordinary people, or even the serfs in France who owe service. And everybody owes military service to the person above them. Right? Different conditions matter out, but generally speaking, it's only 30 days. It's only a month, or at best the campaign. The idea is you're going to go to war in the summer, you'll be back in time for the harvest. Everybody thinks this is the way to do it. This is one of the reasons why war in France goes on for 100 years, because nobody can afford to keep an army in the field for 10 years to actually turn a major victory into dominating. In later wars, if you have a result like Agincourt, they lose the country. Yeah, but in this, they don't. But there are certain elements of this. So what this means is, the campaign seasons are very short, they're very expensive to continue, which is why they'll tend to be big battle, then small sieges, because most of the troops have gone home. But, and everybody's an amateur. Yeah, you might have weapons, you might have been trained to fight since you were a kid on some level, but then there are certain groups of what Nick referred to, professional soldiers. These are people whose full-time job is to be a soldier. Now, this is incredibly expensive, to be paid all year round. But the two significant ones in this we talked about so far is these 6,000 Frenchmen that are coming over. They're not part-time farming and part-time soldiering. They're paid for soldiering, and they're going to be there for some years. And the same with a lot of the English garrisons in France, particularly the captain of Calais, has got one of the only standing armies in the world at this time, like full-time paid soldiers. And that is going to provide a sort of level of training. It's one of the reasons the English are able to do so well with smaller forces, is they have a cadre of full-time troops. And was that, will you say that was broadly speaking all right, Nick, or was that a lot of tosh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's true. So if we go to the next slide, as you said, the Clarence was doing chevauchée, some raids as per the orders of Henry V through Anjou and Maine. You can see Anjou and Maine in the map. And he met. Go to the next one, Kaiser. Sorry to put you.
Right.
So this was the area where he was doing the chevauchées. So he met the vanguard of the Scots, and he charged. He immediately captured them, and he found out that there was a larger Scottish army close to the Beaujais, the Ville Beaujais. That's the village of Beaujais. So Clarence couldn't wait for the remaining of the army. Salisbury left to bring the longbowmen, so he charged without the longbowmen. I mean, Clarence was desperate, as I said, to match the exploits of his brother. He was he missed Agincourt. You can understand his, let's say, psychology. So the Franco-Scots were largely unprepared for the attack. Many were at the morning prayers, playing sports. So if you go to the next slide, and you will see the battlefield. So as Clarence attempted to cross the river, a small Scottish force nearby raised the alarm. Here is Beaujais and the Ville Beaujais. You see Beaujais with the coat of arms of wild boar, and the Ville Beaujais, where the battle was, is the coat of arms. You see the blue with the swords. So this is the area where Clarence was doing the chevauchée. So if you go to the next slide, you will see Clarence. Here is where the battlefield was. So Clarence was crossing the bridge. The Scottish and French vanguard sent the alarm to the remaining force. The English charged headstrong, without any support of longbowmen, and they were basically, despite Clarence, I mean, he pushed forward. They were basically, the bulk of Scots and the French were concealed behind the ridge, as you can see, and he was attacked, and the English were annihilated. Many great commanders died, but Clarence was actually a very early casualty of this battle, the Battle of Beaujais, as it's called. If you go to the next slide, you will see that.
Could we explain what chevauchée is at some point, Nick?
Chevauchée is a warfare of the period where usually you're destroying the economy of your opponent. So basically, they are fast, quick armies who go and burn villages, burn towns or cities if they can. They destroy the economy, they destroy the crops, they destroy the fields, they kill the farmers. So they basically create problems to the economy of the opponent, so it would not be able to raise money or raise armies to fight a war.
And this is mostly done by, not by cavalry, but by mounted infantry. English mounted infantry do. This is the revolution in warfare that the English bring to Normandy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's something that the Black Prince and Edward III brought to the war.
And the other thing they will do is it's going to force the French to come and fight, because if you cannot defend your people, then they're not going to remain loyal to you. So if we're out burning towns and villages, the French are going to have to throw what they have at us as quickly as possible, which is going to give us our best chance. We've got a small professional army. They've got a large levy army. We want them to come running at us as recklessly as possible. So we're going to go out and burn their farms, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just thought you mentioned it a few times that some people will not know what that means.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I completely ignored that word. I was like, it's just a thing. But thank you.
It's just another word. Yeah.
Another word.
Yeah.
So in the battle, Clarence was an early casualty. The Scots charged and they killed Clarence. John Carmichael of Douglasdale unhorsed him, breaking his lance in the process. And this event was immortalizing his crest of Carmichael. You can see his crest. You can see the broken lance.
Right.
So John Carmichael was the famous noble, Scottish noble who unhorsed him. And there are many knights who took who has been said that they gave the final blow to Clarence, but most probably was Alexander Buchanan, who is credited with the killing of the Duke with a mace, who crushed his skull, and then he was holding the dead Duke's coronet aloft on his lance in triumph. And you can see here.
That's about making a point, isn't it?
You can see here the clan Carmichael coat of arms with the broken lance. That is, of course, very important. You killed the Prince of the Crown.
Yeah, and that's a tournament thing, isn't it? Is it in jousting? Although when we watch in the movies, they're supposed to knock somebody off the horse. The reality of the tilting yard is you're not supposed to knock them off the horse. That's really dangerous. What you're supposed to do is break your lance on their shield, because that would unhorse them if they weren't actually sort of riveted into position. That's proof that you were accurate. That's exactly. The skill check. Yeah, is to break your lance on the opponent is to hit him properly. Yeah,
exactly.
All right.
So another thing that we have to let's say myth that we can break now is that the Scottish were fighting with kilts and jackets. The Scottish, as you can see, in order for a Scottish noble to unhorse a prince of the crown, he must have had a very good armor. Generally, the Scottish, and especially the Scottish who came at that time around 1420s in France, were very well equipped. The nobles were as well equipped as the English. They knew how to joust. They were great warriors. There is nothing to do with clansmen and clan warriors. They were very well equipped knights. And obviously that's how Carmichael managed to unhorse Clarence and kill him. Now, if you go to the next slide. Now, why we said all this prologue before we talk about the battle? Why? Because this is the context of the battle. This is why we understand why the battle was so bloody and was a grudge match. The same force of the Scottish and the same nobles who killed Clarence were the commanders of the Franco-Scottish army in the Battle of Verneuil. Douglas, Buchanan, Buchan, all of them were at that battle. So Clarence was so much loved from his peers and the English people that this was a revenge for the English. This was personal. That's why it was the bloodiest battle. No quarter was given, and we're going to discuss it a bit further down. So it was 1424, and the English army under Bedford and Earl of Salisbury were laid siege in the stronghold of Ivry. This is 42 kilometers northwest of Verneuil. You can see in the map here and the distances. Now, the Franco-Scottish army was going to go to Ivry to lift the siege, but they left very late to meet Count of Aumale and other and Narbonne, two French commanders who were going to be in the army, and the English won the castle, and the Scottish and the French didn't go at all. But they had a meeting and they decided to attack Verneuil. Now, if we go to the next slide, Verneuil, you see it's 42 kilometers. Verneuil was taken by the French and the Scottish with very simple ruse. A group of Scots leading some of their fellow countrymen as prisoners, pretended to be English. They claimed that Bedford defeated the Allies at the battle, and whereupon the gates were opened, and the Scots and the French took the city without not even a scratch.
See, if we do that, that's a clever trick, but if the Scots do it to us, that's dirty.
Yeah, that's dirty.
So as soon as Bedford found out that the Scots took Verneuil, he marched with his army 42 kilometers, and he reached outside Verneuil, where he deployed the army for battle. If you go to the next slide, I think.
Can I just ask you, is this your scenery, this castle here?
Yeah, it's my scenery. Yeah, I had a castle. It's my. I put some fire.
You didn't have to set it on fire for this, mate.
No, I burned it before, no problem.
and is that 15 or 28 mil? Because I know you do both scales.
Yeah. This is 28 mil, I think.
Just because there's a brief quote, but can I just mention Andy Smith, who's a regular viewer of the channel, at the boyish age of 51, he is going to be doing a charity. He's ex-RAF and he's raising for a local hospice, which I think is a charity that he's supporting. And he's going to do a boxing. He's going to do a boxing match to raise money for charity. And that is about having skin in the game, mate. So if you go over onto the Modelling for Advantage Facebook group, I think he's posted it on. I'll get on there later and repost it to the Facebook page. But, you know, the guy is going to let somebody else punch him in the head for 20 minutes to raise money for charity. You've got to support that, right? Anyway, so sorry to interrupt, Nick.
No, it's okay. It's just a chat. I'm not doing a lecture.
yeah, exactly. So this is the pretext. We decided we're going to go and fight Verneuil because the Dirty Scots have nicked it from us.
Well, Verneuil was a very important location. I mean, half of Normandy was, all of Normandy was under the English control, and you know, these were strongholds that they had to be captured in order to control all Normandy. So Verneuil was under the English control. Then they went to capture Ivry. They captured Ivry, but then the Scots took it over with this clever ploy. So you know, all these fortresses were in trade routes. Special, very, very critical locations to control borders, to control trade, to control food. So they had to put them. It was not, otherwise they wouldn't have no meaning.
And the local people are going to be taxed by whoever's in this castle, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So if we go to the next slide, and so the English and the French deployed. The Franco-Scottish army deployed a mile north of Verneuil, so they had the castle behind them on an open plain that would give advantage to the Milanese men at arms. The French had some Milanese very, very, very well armored men at arms to attack. This was the plan, to attack the Longuemen. The reason was that the French were, as we said at the beginning of our chat, they were so disappointed and they were fearing the English Longuemen. They didn't know how to deal with them, so they brought some Milanese knights who came a year earlier. Dauphin brought them, very well equipped. We're going to see their equipment. The commanders, as you can see here, was Aumal and Norbonne for the French army. The French army was around 16,000. Around. You can go to the next slide. These are the two commanders, and here the Archibald Douglas and John Stewart, Thurlow of Backham, were the commanders of the Scottish, who were around 6,000. Archibald Douglas is known as the Tyne man, if you know that. Tyne in I think ancient English means lose, because he lost all his battles. Whatever he fought in Hamilton Hill, he lost. He fought in Shrewsbury, he lost. So they were calling him Tyne man, and Tyne means lose. I think I read it.
This I think same family, the Earls of Douglas. This same family. The power base is in Cheshire, but particularly on the Isle of Man. Thomas Lord Stanley in the Wars of the Roses, who's the great betrayer at Bosworth, and effectively decides he becomes the Earl of Derby as a result of his treachery at Bosworth. There's this guy's granddad, who we're talking about now.
Yeah, wow. And they called him Tyneman because three major battles he lost. I mean, they won Bourget, but he lost Shrewsbury and Hamilton Hill, I think. The Earl of Buchan was the Constable of France. He was given this position by the Dauphin, a very powerful position with a lot of estates. The French were not very happy with the Scottish getting all these positions, to tell you the truth. They were not happy at all. If we go to the next slide, we'll see now the French were around 10,000, the Scottish were 6,000, the Italian knights were around 500. The French were not that well equipped and they were not that well trained, as it's been said. The captains were, some of them were teaching them how to fight or how to use arms before the battle. The best soldiers at the time of the battle were the Scottish. They were really well trained, very well equipped. And also, of course, the Italian knights. So you had the Franco-Scottish army deployed on the line. The Scottish were right, the French were on the left, but it was a continuous line. Oh, not continuous, but close enough. The Count of Aumale and Narbonne were commanders of the French, and as we said, Douglas and the Buchan were of the Scottish. The Italian knights from Milan, they were Lombard knights, were commanded by an Italian commander. I don't recall his name. We have it, but I don't recall his name now. If we go to the next one. Now for the English, we had two great commanders, the Duke of Bedford, the brother of Henry V, and Thomas Montague, 4th Earl of Salisbury. These were legendary commanders for the English, legendary commanders. The Earl of Salisbury and both of them were fighting in the front ranks. They were very, very great warriors, and the death of Salisbury during the siege of Orleans was the beginning of the end for the English, because then the English didn't produce many good commanders after these guys. You had Talbot, you had a couple of other good commanders, but slowly they were becoming older, and they were dying in the battlefield. And England didn't produce good charismatic commanders as they did.
So you got now again because of Agincourt, but also because the French are losing the war, generally speaking, in this period. Is the English are getting more and more experienced, especially the commanders. There might be new troops each campaign season, but same commanders. Whereas the French are losing a lot of their commanders because when you lose a battle, you lose guys, right?
Exactly.
So and that will change in the latter part. But at this point, this is the high point. You keep talking about all these experienced English commanders. Why are the French not? Because they died.
Exactly. That's all the way. If you go to the next slide, guys, I'll go on. So the English were around 10,000 men. The Scottish, as I said, and the French were 16,000. The English deployed into two battles, one under Salisbury on the left, and one under Bedford on the right, with a typical around 4,500 men, or 4,000 men approximately. And the English left around 2,000 longbowmen and pages and assistant man-at-arms support, pages, and in the around 2 miles behind on their baggage train. It is very important to know that the baggage train, there were around 10,000 horses there from the soldiers who were mounted, and they were all tethered horses tied around the baggage area, and they were also baggage. So it was very well fortified, let's put it this way, because of the horses and everything. So you had
a lot of loot there, and horses are easy to take away.
Exactly, we're allowed 2,000 men at arms. So if we go to the next slide, and we'll see now the deployment. Now there's two versions of the battle. The major deployment is the same, as I said before, but there's a discussion where the Italian knights were. Now there are two let's say, options, the opinions. This was according to Byrne, one fighter of the period, who wrote about Verneuil, that the Lombards were in each flank of the army. There were one in the French part, as you can see, and one on the Scottish part, and they were divided and attacked the English in the flanks. The other, according to Warren, was that the Lombards were together in front of the Scots, and they attacked all together in the center of this English army. I'm leaning from my reading towards the second, according to Warren, that the Italians were not divided. And I will explain to you when we go to the battle. I will explain to you why I believe this. But these are the two main, let's say, the main opinions of the historians of the period that the Italians were divided and that the Italians were not divided. So it depends on personal, let's say, personal opinion. But I will tell you why my opinion goes with the Warrens.
Which
design
is that they're together.
They were together, yeah. So if we go to the next one, so what happened now? And that is according to Byrne, as I said, you can see it better. According to Byrne, the Italians were in the H flank. And if you go down and you see the next slide, according to Warren, here is the Italians. Okay, that's I missed. So in order for us to understand what happened in the battlefield, we should know how the Italians were armed. The Italians, the Lombards in Milan, were the best armorers in the planet, in the world, the known world, were very, very well armed. And the horses were very, very well armed. So this is the horse that the Italian knights would have used at Verneuil. You see the horse armor, the chamfron, the grenet, you have the cantle, you have the clancy knob, all these you can see them where they are. All these were for the protection of the horses. You see how these armored horses, how protected they were. The Italian knights had the best armor, and that's the reason was for them to fight the long.
I want to be equipped with K.
Sorry, John?
Point K on the knight on the horse here. I want one of those.
You want a glancing knob?
Yeah. What's that?
So if it's not obvious, the kind of the birth of the Renaissance is in Italy, and it's going to happen earlier than everywhere else. This is just maybe just right at the beginning of that. But European technology, its pinnacle is in northern Italy. That's where it's happening. And you're starting to get, I don't think they quite claim it in the 100 Years' War, but they're starting to look for arrow-proof armor is a thing that people are starting to talk about it being possible to make as they make it. It's getting more stylized. And actually it's worth, because he's in chat, and I just remembered Boots on the Ground with Dom. The Wallace collection in London, there's a magnificent collection of arms and armor. And if you want to see some of this like really, really over the top Italian armor, you can see a lot of it there, and it really is it is quite something to look at.
Yeah, so that's how the horses were, and that's why I'm going to show you that these men-at-arms were only recruited to attack the longbowmen. So they were very heavily armored, and because they were Italian and Milanese, they had really the best armor available. So if we go to the next slide, we can see now this is as per Warring, and this is, let's say, an opinion that I prefer as well, that the French and the Lombards were attacking the center of the English. We have to understand something before we see exactly what happened to the battle. We have to understand that it was in August, it was very, very hot. I read books that were saying that during the Middle Ages and during that period of the 100 Years' War, the summers were hotter than now. I'm not going to start a debate about global warming, but if you read history, you learn things. So the summers were hotter in France than they are in France currently. So you can imagine the stakes, and I'm saying this because I'm going to show it you in the movements. The stakes were not. It was impossible to put them really hard inside the earth. They were very easy to break, and this is something that played.
So these are they called chevaux de frise or something? English.
Yeah, it was very warm. It was very warm. The plain was dry, and it was very difficult for the English to hammer the stakes inside.
But knowing that the French cavalry, the French fighting style is to attack the cavalry, the English men at arms and longbowmen all carry a few of these sharpened stakes to drive it. It's part of their equipment. So they're not prepared defenses. They prepare them that morning. Yeah. But they couldn't drive them in securely because the ground was dry.
Exactly. They drove them in, but they were dry. The ground was dry, and this had a repercussion to the battlefield. Is there another slide or no? I don't remember now.
There's a next slide, yeah.
So this is before the battle. Let's have some fun before we talk. So Douglas is said to have received a message from Bedford that he had come to drink with him and prayed for an early meeting, where Douglas replied that having failed to find the Duke in England, he had come to seek him in France. I put this conversation so we can understand that we're talking about commanders and nobles who were fighting many years against each other, and there was hatred there. And of course, we don't forget that these French, Scottish nobles were the ones who killed Bedford's brother and the brother of the king, the Duke of Clarence. So we're talking about a really personal battle here, a really grudge match. You know, it was very, very personal.
And generationally, right? So there'll always be an Earl of Oxford, but the current one, his dad might have died in the last battle against the French. So there's a new Duke, you know, Earl of Oxford, and he knows exactly who killed him and exactly what colours they're wearing today. Like, he's over there, we're going to get that brick. No matter what happens, we're going to get him.
That's the main target.
Yeah.
But especially with this generation of commanders, Buchan, Douglas, Bedford, Henry V, all these are fighting from a young age, and they fought in battles against each other. They're not different nobles, and that makes it even worse. For example, Douglas, Bedford fought in the Battle of Shrewsbury. They fought in the Battle of Hamilton Hill. They fought in the Battle of Beaujeu. Bedford was not there, but they killed his brother. So it's not their ancestors or their cousin. None of them were killed, and they were arch enemies for many years.
Yeah.
But you can see the humor also, you know, Douglas, Bedford saying he came to drink with him, and Douglas said that he couldn't find him in England, so he came to France to find him. You know, it's really, you know, fun. I mean, it was an enjoyable chat, you know, enjoyable conversation or whatever messages.
And it's personal, right?
Yeah, it's personal, especially Douglas. So if we go to the final, before I show you the battle, to the final slide. So Bedford is also said that he had sent a herald to Douglas once both armies have been deployed to ask what terms for battle he required, and which Douglas grimly replied that the Scots would neither give or receive any quarter. So it was a battle to the end.
A battle, You give no receive. If you don't, quarter is surrender, right? We won't surrender, and we won't take prisoners. All right, okay. These are the terms for today's battle, are they?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, in terms of quarter as well, another thing is prisoners are incredibly valuable in medieval warfare. Prisoners are hostages. Hostages will be paid for. Right, that is a thing that's gonna. If you've ever heard the term a king's ransom? There is literally a cash value. If you were to capture a king, this is what they will pay to get him back. But that goes right down to the lowly soldier. A bowman has a ransom. So saying that you're going to fight and take no prisoners is really saying, like, no, we're in it for the blood, mate, because you're giving up the main reason for going on campaign. For a lot of young nobles is to make money by capturing people.
Exactly. So it was really bad. So what I'm showing you now, having the miniatures, very quickly, I'm going to show you the strategy here. That's why I put it. I think it's easier for guys to see. I put my miniatures, how they deployed, as you can see here, Kaiser. Okay. So what happened was that, let me get my stick.
This reminds me of DBA, mate.
Yeah. So here we have deployment. So the Scots deployed in one line and the French in one line will go for the Mountain Knights being in the center. Salisbury was here, Bedford was here, and they had stakes. We had longbowmen. Apparently, it seems that the longbowmen were not clearly defined as per the chronicles. It seems that the longbowmen were mixed with the men-at-arms in this battle. In the back, 2 miles, there was the baggage train where the English had 2,000 longbowmen guarding it at some pages. So what happened is that the French attacked in the center, and it was basically a disarray that destroyed the English line. As I said before, that's why I mentioned it. The stakes were not strong enough, hammered in the ground, and basically they just annihilated the English line. They broke the English line. But because, as we said before we started the video, Kaiser, these were tournament fighters. They had lances and they had really heavy armor. It was very difficult for them with the speed they had to kill English, because the English were rolling down, were falling down to avoid the horses, and it was difficult for them to push the lances and kill English down, you know, where they were laying in the ground. So basically the aim of this charge was to break the lines. Usually the mounted charge is there to break the lines and for the foot to follow behind to get advantage and of the exposed flanks. That's the strategy of a mounted charge. Now, the Italians broke the English lines. The English were in disarray. But unfortunately, because they were mercenaries, instead of taking advantage of this, and usually the strategy of that time is charge, break the line, retreat, charge again, that would have been devastating for the English. They left and they attacked the baggage train in the back, 2 miles away.
Time.
Yeah. The English, they had some brilliant commanders. Unfortunately, some English left. Some English were frightened, and they really fled the 500 bowmen, and some captains fled the battle. One of them is a famous captain who was hung, drawn, and quartered by Bedford after they caught him. And many mounted knights, mounted heralds left to the different cities around, saying that Bedford lost the battle as soon as they saw this this attack from the Italians. But Bedford and Salisbury are the best commanders in 100 Years' War. So they reordered the troops immediately, and surprisingly, they're ready to fight. The Scottish and the French were following behind. They couldn't, because the Italians left and they didn't take advantage of a second attack to really destroy and break the English flank, so the foot can take advantage of it, were too much behind to take advantage of this break. The Italians left, and then the English line again is ordered. So the Scots attack. The Scots attack the English in Salisbury's position. Salisbury stay as it is, and it's a ferocious battle. It's a very hard-fought fight. Salisbury was really, really hard-pressed. There was nobody was giving away. The Scottish, as I said, were really, really good fighters. So bloody battle goes on, with the Salisbury being very hard-pressed. What Bedford decides to attack the French, and he starts marching towards the French, who the French are marching. But the French are marching a bit, let's say, disorderly. Actually, not disorderly, because they want to avoid the English longbow fire. So they're
spacing out a bit.
Yeah, spacing out a bit. But Bedford is attacking in order. They move around 10 to 20, 30 meters. They stop. They reorder again. They close their ranks. They move. And every time they stopped, they shouted, Bedford, Bedford, and Clarence, Clarence. Now you understand why this battle was a grudge match. They were shouting the name of the dead prince.
Yeah.
So the Scots, the French and the English meet, and a battle starts. Again, a hard-fought battle. Maybe the English had the upper hand, were better armored because the French had weaker troops. But again, the French had 10,000, the English were 4,000. So you can imagine quite big difference in man. Now, what's happening here in the back? The Italians go to the baggage train and they find 2,000 English longbowmen waiting for them, hiding behind and protecting themselves behind tethered horses and in baggage trains. So they were basically fortified. Now there's a question. The Italians fought, and there's two options of what happened. One is the Italians fought, they got quite a few loot, and they left, they disappeared, or they were annihilated by the English. I would go for the second. The Italians managed to get some loot, and then they left. They're out, they've gone. So the battle is still ongoing. Before I tell you what happened in the end, I don't want to bore you. The battle started with the longbow fire. The Scottish brought some longbowmen, and this is another myth we need to break. And there was a really ferocious and vicious longbow fire exchange between the English and the Scots without any winner. The Scottish had really good longbowmen. They had really good, the same quality as the English. They had very good archers. The difference was that the English, obviously more organized and training every Sunday, they had more. The Scots didn't have this mechanism of creating longbowmen, so they had less. But the Scottish had very good longbowmen as well as the English. They were not lesser quality. So
part of that is Douglas, though, because Douglas's lands are in Cheshire and the Isle of Man, and that's the kind of real cadre of veteran English longbowmen, a Cheshire longbowman, and that's one of the reasons why it will be so significant later in the Wars of the Roses. That all Englishmen are training with the longbow, but it's particularly the Cheshire longbowman is the real prize plum, and Douglas is fighting for the Scots here.
Yeah, exactly. So the battle is ongoing. The English are pressed really hard. Salisbury is pressed really hard by Douglas and Buchan. So the English longbowmen move and attack the French from the flank. They came from the back and attacked the French from the flank, and that was it. It was a surprise. They started shooting them from the flank, and then 2,000 longbowmen attacked the French, who just broke and started running towards Verneuil, with the English following them and killing them one by one. Verneuil didn't open the gates. The people of Verneuil did not open the gates to the French, and all the French, with all the commanders, Narbonne, Aumale survived, I think, were drowned in the moats and were killed and butchered by the English.
That is grim.
Yeah, that was the bloodiest battle. All were killed. So what happens here? The Salisbury, Bedford reorganizes himself after deposing the Scottish, and you don't need me to tell you what he did afterwards. He attacked the Scottish from the rear. There was nothing the Scottish could do. Obviously, we said from the beginning that no quarter was agreed to be given to any, and the Scots fell to a man. Everybody was killed, and it was the last. I mean, since from Verneuil onwards, the Scotland could not field large armies in France. This was a disaster for the Scots. For 3/4 of an hour, the English were slaughtering the Scottish. It was a bloodbath. Bedford himself fought in the battle. He was wielding a fearsome 200 poleaxe, leading, I have this quote, leading one veteran to recall, he reached no one whom he did not fell. Also, another contemporary writer said the Bedford's poleaxe smashed open an expensive armor like a modern tin can, the body underneath being crushed and mangled before even the blade sunk in. So
wow.
These two great commanders were fighting with their troops. That's why they were so well respected. So the issue was, and that's why the English were calling it Clarence and Clarence, invoking Thomas Duke of Clarence. It was the revenge of Bedford's brother killed in Beaujeu. The English killed any Scotsman standing in their way. Some surrendered, but were slain to avenge the death of Clarence.
And no quarter will be asked or given, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
That's the deal.
Them's the rules.
Exactly, and the long-standing amenity between Scotland and England meant that no quarter was given, and almost the entire Scots were fell in the battlefield, including Douglas and Buchan. This was basically let me go back to you. This was basically the end of the battle. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, are we getting you back? There you go. Right. I thought you were doing that. I fiddled with the camera because I thought you were doing that earlier.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
That was the Battle of Verneuil, 100 Years War. Interesting one, especially because it just hasn't percolated popular memory. I mean, people, if they've heard about the 100 Years, well, most English people have heard of Agincourt, even if they think it was against Napoleon, right? They've heard the name before. But if they know of 100 Years, and then outside of that, because like when I talk to you, I said about, well, maybe you do Crécy or Poitiers. These are probably the next big, well-known battles. And said, well, no, let's do this one because it is it's a decisive battle and it's a significant battle, and people haven't heard of it. And I hadn't. I had to go away and do some reading for today. A little bit about 100 Years War. So the battle, if we want to just kind of round off the story, if that's all right, Nick. The Battle of Verneuil, decisive victory for the English. Then how does the campaign wrap up then? How does the rest of 1424 pan out?
Well, basically the consequences of the battle was that the English captured all border posts of Lancaster and Normandy, with the only exemption of Mont Saint-Michel. So basically this battle was very important because Normandy became English, and then the English could move for the siege of Orleans and the final nail in the coffin for the French. So all Normandy after this battlefield and after this campaign, because there was another campaign, there was, Bedford and Salisbury continued taking over strongholds. But this battle and the annihilation of the French and the Scottish army, all border posts were taken by the English of Normandy. So
and is it?
then,
I can't. Is it 1525 that you get crowned King of France? Is that next year? Yeah. So this is the campaigns that follow are much easier because of this, and it ends up with basically the French. Now it doesn't last very long, as we know, Joan of Arc and all that, and more to talk about later. So is this the high watermark of the English campaigns in France? I mean,
the English continued with the siege of Orleans. Victories like the Battle of the Herrings, although not very famous battle. It was a great victory for the English, and Orleans was ready to surrender to the English. It was that much ready to surrender, and if Orleans fall, France will fall. That was the last big stronghold. But then you see, as I said to you before, random events. The Earl of Salisbury, the greatest commander with Bedford at the time, who were holding the English army together, was during the siege. He was in the siege tower checking what's happening around and to reorder his troops. And fly-by shrapnel from a bomb. It hit a wall and it changed, let's say, arc, and it killed him.
Right.
So it was a total chance. So with Salisbury's death, with Salisbury's death, when you lose great commanders and great warriors, the morale is down. Then you had Joan of Arc that raised the morale. Also, you had great commanders as the Duke of Orleans. From the movie Jean of Arc, the Bastard of Orleans. He was one of the greatest commanders that appeared at the time, because you had Jean of Arc, but you should have also great commanders around her.
That's what she's called, isn't she? Jean Lapucelle, the French.
And Laire and other commanders who appeared at that time with Jean of Arc. And of course, the death of Salisbury. Bedford could not do it on his own. Also, the Burgundians started
switch sides.
They didn't switch yet, but they started thinking about it. They were not as aggressive.
They don't turn up.
Yeah,
they don't always turn up to fight.
Yeah,
they're just other Frenchmen, mate. You can't trust them.
Yeah. So I think after the death of Salisbury, this was the downfall of the English. Great commanders died from the English, and obviously it was also, as we said, the mastering of gunpowder that the French managed to master much better than the English. Then, as soon as the French mastered the gunpowder, the longbow was obsolete.
Yeah, yeah, and that would take time to take effect because the English were so dominant, but it would happen. All right, just because you mentioned her, then just it was still in the wrap up phase. Joan of Arc comes along for some years later, right?
I think 1424, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it in this period she emerges?
Yeah.
Because does she fight at the Siege of Orleans? I can't remember. I think she might do.
She was fighting. Yes, she was fighting in the battles of Orleans, and also she was fighting in the Battle of Patay, another great battle where the French destroyed the English army. They attacked quickly, and they managed to find them without the stakes and without these guys being deployed, and they attacked them and they destroyed them. So yes, she was the main reason, with some great commanders. Obviously, it was not that there were some really great commanders that suddenly appeared the French side.
Yeah, you collect 100 Years' War. With either side, you pick your moment in history. You get the battles where the English do most of the winning, or you get the battles where the French do most of the winning. You know, because it's a nice long period.
Well, the major battles of the era, and the most important were won by the English. You know, Crécy-Poitiers, Agincourt, Verneuil. The French won back the territories with Bernard de Gascon during the end days of Edward III, but they won them with guerrilla warfare. It was very clever. He was a very great commander, Bernard de Gascon. So he won all the areas fighting the English. And then I think there was no major pitched battle except the Battle of Castillon. That was the last battle in the 100 Years' War that the French destroyed the English, but it was not a major strategy. They had too much gunpowder. You had a commander was Talbot, you know, the lion, the Achilles of the English. The Marshal, who was a great general, who was a great warrior, but he was not a commander. So all the commanders dead. He was very brave. He promised, he was captured by the French a few years earlier, and he promised that he will fight without an armor if they released him. And he fought without an armor, and they killed him. And of course, the French gave him great honor when he died. But the Battle of Castillon was basically gunpowder, and the English were destroyed with the gunpowder. They were not deployed very well. And then, of course, you have, I think, the beginning that I don't know anything about of the War of the Roses. The things were getting bad in England, and I think the campaign faltered. And then,
but it's an interesting point you raised there, and I promise we will finish soon, guys. I know we're overrunning. Is Edward the
Sorry,
Fourth?
Guys, I'm talking too much.
Edward IV was paid off by the King of France to not invade France and rekindle his claim. And we're talking, I don't remember the details, but it's something like 10,000 gold florins a year or something. It's a lot. Is paid. England is set an invading army. He's gone to Calais, comes outside the front door, and the King of France is like, mate, should we have a few beers and talk about this? How about instead of you coming back, I just pay you what you'd maybe make by being King of France, and we all agree not to fight. And because there's still that terrible fear that's percolated the French, that just fighting the English in open battle is just not a good idea. You're looking in all of these Franco-English battles of the 100 Years' War. The English are usually quite heavily outnumbered. But the French realizes that the way to win this war is not to face their field army, because they've only got one small army. Ignore that and deal with everything else. If they're in Normandy, we'll take back Gascony. If they're in Gascony, we'll go back to Normandy. We'll shadow their armies, but not fight them, and take territory elsewhere. You know, and it works. It works, and it's actually that kind of war England can't afford to fight in the way that we've done to them. The chevauchée was a way of forcing them to fight. But that only worked when we were in their territory, not when they were in ours.
Yeah. Something to say also, there was a Burgundian contingent as well fighting with the English. I didn't mention it. They were fighting together. But I found a very nice passage, if we have time, 1 minute, about the conclusion of the battle.
Go for it.
The French had clearly lost confidence in their ability to deal with the English on their own at Verneuil and rallied heavily upon foreign troops, notably Lombards and Scots. It is probable that the Scot captains gave their high rank, were largely responsible for the direction of the battle. The previous experience of the Earl of Douglas in fighting the English may have been crucial in the deployment of the well-armored Italian heavy cavalry, which successfully broke through the English line. Basing also hints that the archers were not simply employed in blocks on the wings, but mixed with dismounted men-at-arms along the whole front. Evidence from the sources suggests that the Lombards were placed in the front of the French line and that only a single cavalry charge took place. Having disrupted the English line, then they fell upon the baggage and probably needed a little persuasion from the English reserve archers to leave the field. This would have left the English reserve fresh to take the tired Frenchmen on the flanks, as we said. So as we said, probably the Italians didn't fight that much the English baggage. As the majority of the French foot were ill-trained and lacked discipline, they soon took to flight, leaving the embattled Scots vulnerable to an envelopment which resulted in their complete destruction. Warren gives the numbers of the English slain as 1,600, the principal captains of whom were named the one Dudley and other Charlton. That's it.
So there you go, a great battle. I've got to say, Nick, you don't have to commit to it now, but Tony Halton said before you even finished, another episode, please, part 2, post-Orleans, the tide turns. I mean, the Siege of Orleans is quite a big event, right? I don't know whether you can cover that in detail.
Well, the Siege of Orleans is a big event, and it has smaller skirmishes and battles that we have to describe in order for us to understand. It's not an issue. I can scale it down, and I have to read it also. I've forgotten it, but the Siege of Orleans is a combination. As we said now, that Verneuil, the reason of Verneuil, and I know I can imagine now everybody understood the reason. Verneuil comes through Agincourt, that's the Scots and the Italians, because of the annihilation of the French, and comes through Beaujeu because of the death of Clarence, thus the hatred of the English and the bloodiest battle in the 100 Years' War. So the same with Orleans. The Siege of Orleans has other smaller battles, smaller skirmishes and events that play an important role. But this is where as you said, the tide turns. This is where the English are starting losing. They lost the battle. The morale is down. Salisbury is dead. Joan of Arc is creating problems. You know, she's the messenger of God. People believe these things at that time.
She's a witch, mate. Facts.
Yeah. So this is where the tide turns, and also I think I don't know much about the Wars of the Roses, but also I think the era of great English captains and commanders is thinning. You know, they're dying. You know, you have Salisbury, who's gone, who's amazing. Bedford is getting older. When Bedford died, they lost France. You have some captains who died, but there's no great English commanders appearing to fight in France at that time. When you had before Oxford, Salisbury's, you had Reginald Cobham, you have Northampton, you had you don't know who to choose from. You had amazing command.
Yeah, they're all great captains. Yeah. Whereas their sons and nephews don't turn out to be quite so good. Yeah. All right. So as wrap up, a couple of things to remember. Just because I think I only half said it. When I mentioned the Wallace collection, if you're interested in medieval arms and armor, the Wallace collection, I have to say, it's mostly Renaissance. I was referring to it largely in reference to that Italian armor that Nick was talking about. If you want to see a fully armored horse in real scale, they've got a magnificent one there. I think it's from a little bit later, but it's very much in the same style. And Dom from Boots on the Table, I'm sure he did a review of it. I think he went round and he made a video. Maybe he'll post a link in the description or something. I'm pretty sure he'd done that. Although I've been there, I haven't actually made a video about it. And the other one was to talk about was to remember Andy Smith. You want to check the Facebook group. If you're not in the Facebook group, there'll be a link down in the description on the YouTube here. Facebook group. We have a Facebook page, but that's kind of one direction communication. That's me saying what's happening. The group you can post to. He's going to box for charity to raise money for a local hospice. He's been working out and so forth, getting into shape. And as I say, as a man, I'm not quite 51 yet myself, but I certainly would not want to get punched in the head for charity. I admire him for that. In terms of what you can expect to see over the coming months, we've made that little flyer that we put up on the Facebook page. I just don't think it's out yet. But in a couple of weeks' time, we've got this month we've got Jams Mini Mods, who makes lots of Warhammer conversions, really, really nice ones, including making his own beards. I love that. Hand rolls beards out of green stuff and other things. And towards the end of the month, one of the editors for Wargame, not the editor, one of the writers, I think, forget his name, from Wargames Illustrated, is coming on. That's that magazine that you occasionally buy when you get in a train journey, right? Wargames Illustrated. Yeah. That's what's coming up. And obviously our Combined Arms campaign. There's a short series of videos we've already filmed of the campaign map, and then our first bolt action game. We're at that point. We've recorded that, or you've not seen it yet. So we're now getting ready for the game, which is why I was painting these 250s. It's the new kit, the little mini half tracks, exactly. and there'll be a review of that quite soon.
Yeah, John. And that's also why I was painting Bowman as well.
To not get ready for the game that we've been talking about. Nick, please show your appreciation to Nick. Nick did all the work today, right? These
all of the work
are not just give the thanks in the comments. These type of episodes were not
possible
if I was doing it. I know a bit about it, but Nick went away, spent a weekend putting the PowerPoint slides together. You know, I can chip in and comment, having read a bit and so forth. We're trying to do more of these videos, but we rely heavily on the knowledge and willingness of the guest to make them happy, because I know a lot of people enjoy them. And I do, I always learn stuff. So Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for everybody. And sure, well, it's whenever it's in your schedule, we'll do Orleans, so we see how the tide turns.
Hey, if it was just up to me, we'd do it next week. You need time to work on it and so forth. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.